Thank you very much. I'm honored to join my fellow alumni of the class of 2015 at this momentous occasion. You have earned your degrees and you well deserve it. This is a proud moment for you, for your parents, for your professors, for the college. Proud, joyous, and sad. Joyous is self-understood. You've worked hard, you've achieved much, you've passed all your courses, you've gone through all the hurdles, you've overcome all the obstacles, you've made it. So why sad? Your teachers will remain, the college will remain, and you will leave. You have entered their life, they have shared with you their knowledge, they've worked with you to make you better, and now you will be gone. And for at least some of you, you will be leaving the world that has become a second home, friends that have become another family, a community that was easily achieved by proximity, by shared courses and athletics, by sharing living quarters, late nights, hopefully in the library, but not really, and a common stage in life. You'll be going forth into a world where the intimacies, the friendships, the commonalities that have been so simple to find will be more difficult and more complex. I'm honored more that the college has inaugurated the chair in Judaic Studies. I still don't know how President Marv Henberg found me, but I do vividly recall our conversations in my office and his commitment to moving this position forward. I was pleased to be a sounding board to offer advice and counsel, and frankly flattered to be asked, and even more pleased by its swift success. And more pleased still as I have come to learn over the last day how very special a place the College of Idaho is and its particular ethos. You have achieved something very special here, and as an outside observer, soon to become an alumni, I can feel it, I can sense it, I can taste it, and it was worthy of admiration and preservation. The achievement of a Judaic Studies chair is an important milestone to be celebrated, and it's a recent achievement in academic studies. 90 years ago, there were only 2 chairs in Jewish studies throughout the United States. 45 years ago, the Association of Jewish Studies began with 19 members, and today their membership has grown to more than 1,400 scholars. Thus, we have come to understand Judaism as an integral part of Western civilization, and Jews and Judaism as a presence in world religion. Christians and Jews have come to understand how deeply rooted Jesus was as a Jew in the traditions of his people. Understanding him in that context enabled a new appreciation of what was so singular about his teaching, where he was a dissident, where he was a religious rebel. It forced Christians to recognize in the Jew not a character from the Old Testament, but a living member of an ongoing faith community who shared much with the one they believed was the Savior, and allowed Jews to approach Jesus' teaching not with fear, but with understanding and with a glimpse of recognition. Dialogue, which was once formally conducted among representatives of faith community, now occurs around water coolers and coffee pots, in offices and in homes. As a result, there's been the enrichment of both faiths. In the United States, freedom of religion, the separation of church and state, has become freedom for religion that can be embraced in freedom, explored in freedom. By understanding the other, we better understand ourselves. This has become an important model today in a world where religious warfare is so commonplace. Throughout the Middle East, we see Jews versus Muslims and Muslims versus Jews, Muslims versus Christians, and Christians versus Muslims. We see Jew versus Jew, we see Christian versus Christian, and we see Muslim versus Muslim. And that's only the 3 great monotheistic religions I have not touched on the East. We're now 13 years after the invasion of Iraq in a world where Sunni versus Shiite slaughter is an everyday commonplace occurrence. And even many well-informed Americans cannot really tell you the difference between the two versions of the same faith. Nothing less than the fate of 20th century humanity may depend on how we understand each other's faiths, and whether religious men and women can understand the other not as a demonic infidel, but as a fellow human being, part of and integral to the divine creation. I have a colleague and childhood friend, Professor Mark Cohen of Princeton, who spent last year in Dubai teaching Judaism to Arabs, sharing with them the great heritage of Judeo-Islam, the great era of the golden age of Spain in which Jews and Muslims encountered Greek and Roman civilization and each other, and reshaped their own traditions by embracing Plato and Aristotle, refashioning them in the language of their own faith. It was a time when Muslims and Jews spoke the same language, read the same poetry, pondered the same secular and religious literature, and lived in harmony with one another. Incidentally, they not only reshaped their own faith, but they preserved Greek and Roman classics for Western Christian civilization. Such an experience must be replicated elsewhere. Even if it cannot lead to peace, it will diminish hatred and preserve the idea that there is another way. So the College of Idaho is to be congratulated, and its president, my friend, is to be celebrated for this important step. And you, my fellow graduates, should know that students who will follow you will have more opportunity than you have had as this program grows and flourishes. I've been asking around what I should say at graduation. I sought wisdom and insight, so I did what I do on those occasions. I turned to my students and to my children for advice. My kids said, talk about yourself as an example. My students said, talk about what the graduates will face. Offer them some traditional wisdom, challenge them to go forth, and do so in 3 to 5 minutes. I may take a bit more, but not much more. Your president has been more generous than my children. A word about my own career may be instructive for you. I was trained as a rabbi, but never really served as a rabbi except to do the wonderful things that I've been able to do. I was trained as an academic and presumed after my university press published my book to find reviews, and after I got excellent teaching recommendations and got tenure, that I would remain there for my entire career. My life was on a journey that looked like we could predict where I would end up by the age of 31. And then an unexpected opportunity came my way. I was asked to be the staff of the President's Commission on the Holocaust that was charged to recommend to the President an appropriate national memorial to the Holocaust. I knew nothing about how presidential commissions worked, little about the world of politics. In essence, I was asked to move from a theologian who touched on history to become a historian who stayed deeply away from theology, and become a public historian, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a political reality. As I was making the decision, I remembered a conversation that I overheard in my professor's office. It wasn't in the classroom, it wasn't a long conversation, but we were having a meeting on my doctoral dissertation when the phone rang, and he apologized but took the call, and the conversation that I heard went like this: yes, 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 when, yes, enough. I was an audacious student. I remained that. I also thought, given what my parents were paying in tuition, I was entitled to ask some questions. And I asked him to explain what had happened, and he did. He had received an invitation from a prestigious journal to review the major book of the year. Was he interested? Yes. Could he get it done? Yes. Did he have something interesting to say? Yes. When? November, 60 days away. Would he agree? Yes. What did he know about the author and the subject? He gave a one-word answer: enough. I then asked him, because I was an audacious student, I asked him what he actually knew. His answer guided me. He said, by the time I write the review, I will know enough. So what happened to me was that I had enough confidence in what I knew, and more importantly, in what I could learn, to undertake something entirely new and to learn enough to do it well. I returned years later to create the United States Holocaust Memorial when they had failed 5 times before me. They had tried people with direct knowledge about museums who didn't know the Holocaust, and they failed again and again and again. In desperation, they turned to me, who knew the Holocaust but did not know museums. They asked me what I knew, and you can guess my one-word answer: enough. So I learned museums. I learned films, and each time in my life I've had the privilege to work from something I know into a field I do not know. And the result has been that I've continued to grow, continued to learn. If you ask me what your task is over the next few years, it is to learn to grow, to challenge yourself, not to accept complacency or even limits, at least not until you discover them and humbly understand your own limitations. Those of you who will be privileged to do what you love will find meaning and satisfaction in your work, will find work not as a burden but as an opportunity. The key is to find work that you do well and do it well, and the key is to grow at each stage of your life so that you face new challenges, and that will create for you new opportunities. A word about, you will find being of service to others will give you the greatest satisfaction of self. There was an interesting thing only yesterday, a study of lawyers, and it found something remarkable, that there was no relationship between satisfaction with one's career and how much they earned. Those who were of servants found much greater satisfaction than those who merely earned a lot. A word about the world in which you're about to enter, what you mistakenly call the real world. The world you have lived in is also a real world. And if you are graced with length of days, you have lived perhaps one of 5 days, 1/5 of what is a very long life in a very real world. You have heard again and again that we live in a world of globalization and a knowledge-based economy. You will be working with, competing against people all over the world. You will live in a world without boundaries and without borders, with local, national, and global responsibilities in an interdependent world. What you must take away from your college education is not the accumulation of information, but the ability to learn and the sense that you can master the tasks that lie ahead. Many of you, perhaps most of you, will be working in fields that are unknown today with tools that are unavailable today. Intensify your capacity to learn. I belong to a generation that experienced the first computer. My first portable computer weighed 20 pounds and took 64K discs. I had one of the first handheld 7-pound phones and one of the first fax machines. My students don't know what a telegram is. I belong to a generation that belonged not BC, but BI, before the internet. But I belong to a generation that was conceived in hope. We were born after World War II when our parents thought that they had fought a great war and America was a nation of boom. They had unlimited boundaries. The slogan of a great corporation was progress was our most important product. We were exploring space, first outer space, and then inner space. A young president ran on the platform of the new frontier. I belong to a generation that fought for noble causes. We fought for the civil rights movement. Andrew Goodman was a classmate of mine, a man who was one of 3 killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. He did not live to see graduation, and we implored our university to give him his degree posthumously, even though he never made it beyond his freshman year. When I was in school, we rallied against the war. It was a confrontation of generations. We wanted to transform the world. It was a generation of revolution. My father's war was World War II, and he became known as part of the greatest generation. My war was Vietnam. I belong to a generation that experienced enormous progress. 2 extraordinary miracles characterized the 1990s. One could have never imagined that they would have happened. The fall of communism without a bullet, the creation of a human rights movement, the spring, and then the ultimate demise of the Berlin Wall. And because of my work, I traveled extensively in Eastern Europe and saw the birth of the idea of freedom, the dream of freedom, long before its realization. And in the 1990s, we saw the collapse of apartheid and the nobility of the late, great Nelson Mandela, who could emerge from 27 years in prison and not hate. And Archbishop Tutu chaired a process of truth and reconciliation, healing by confronting and introspection, not by trial, indictment, and accusation. We thought we would bequeath to you a better world. I don't have to tell you about the world in which we live. Violence and hatred, misery and rage, poverty and war, and even the scourge of genocide. So let me tell you a story. A man told his grandson, "A terrible fight is going on inside of me, a fight between 2 wolves. One is evil and represents hate, anger, arrogance, intolerance, and superiority. The other is good, represents joy, peace, love, tolerance, understanding, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, and compassion. The same fight is going on inside of you, inside of every person, too." The grandson then asked, "Which wolf will win?" The old man replied, replied simply, "The wolf you feed." My question, my challenge to you is, which wolf will you feed? As you know, I work on the Holocaust and work very closely with Holocaust survivors who have been my teachers and have become the moral teachers of our generation. I think of them often as counter-testimony to our contemporary culture of rage. Victimization, perceived or actual, is seen as a license to rage and as fuel to violence. To one who is angry, it seems as if all is permissible. Contrast that with them who had every reason to rage at a world and every reason to despair of that world. But Holocaust survivors, who were a small minority of victims, many more were murdered than survived, faced the question of what to do with the accident of their survival. Over time, they came to answer the question, why did I survive? Not by a statement about the past, but what they lived with their life in their aftermath. Because they faced death, many have learned what is most important in life, life itself, love, family, and community. And what my friend and Holocaust survivor and Academy Award winner Gerda Klein called a boring evening at home. The small things, the simple things we have taken for granted cannot be taken for granted, but must be treasured and appreciated. For Jewish survivors, the survival of the Jewish people became paramount. The final statement of Jewish history and Jewish memory must be about life, not death, no matter how pervasive that death. For many survivors, bearing witness conferred a sense of meaning in the aftermath of atrocity. They have told the story of the past to keep a promise they made to those left behind. More importantly, they have told the story of the past in the hope that understanding the past and its evil can transform the future. They responded to death with the recreation of life, and their life itself represents the journey from refugees seeking a new life to survivors who endured something, and finally witnesses people who don't speak of the past only to speak of the past, but to transform the future. What do I have to say to you? In the interreligious sphere, we have to understand how to remain faithful yet embracing. In the personal sphere, we have to create in a world in which our personal lives reflect our values and in which we create in a world of deep impersonality. We create what you have achieved here, which is a sense of community and friendship. I have to plead for you as you go out to understand not your impotence in the world, but your capacity to transform the world and to better the world. One person can make a difference. One person must make a difference. And that person, my fellow graduates, must be you. Don't give up on the world. Engage it, transform it, make it better. And understand that you've been given a great gift by which you can change the world in which we live, and that's the gift of an education that has taught you to learn and that has opened for you all of the boundarylessness of the world in which we live. My teacher, the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, used to remark that he was an optimist against his better judgment. Looking at you, one can say, and looking at this college and looking at the education that you've received, at the concern of your faculty, at the sacrifice of your parents and your families, at the institution that you've been so part of, one can be an optimist not against one's better judgment, but an optimist with one's better judgment. Thank you very much.